Do you own a piece of audio gear that you will never sell? Like never, ever, ever sell it? You're keeping it forever? Or at least as long as forever is for you? It's weird. I have something that I will never sell, and it is a McIntosh MC 2505 amplifier. Let me explain more why I will never sell this amp right after this. Okay, before we get started, I would love for you to leave in the comments below if you've ever regretted selling a piece of audio gear or whatever piece of gear you may have that you plan on keeping forever. I would love to see what other people have in their collection that they will never let go of. It helps me feel not too crazy. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about this MC 2505 amplifier. I purchased this amplifier from a friend back in 2017, I believe. I really enjoy this amplifier, and I wanted to give everyone some reasons why I love it so much, but I also kind of wanted to point out some of the annoyances that come with owning vintage McIntosh audio gear. But before we discuss the pros and cons, I wanted to give you a quick breakdown of the specs of this amplifier. Okay, the McIntosh 2505 is a solid state amplifier, and it was sold between the years 1967 and 1977. Up to this point, McIntosh were known mostly for their tube amps, and this is where they ventured into the solid state market by releasing the MC 2505. Power output is 50 watts per channel, which is not bad for 1967. And that's 50 watts into 8 ohms, and it has a wide variety of speaker load impedance options. It goes all the way down from 4 ohms and includes 8 ohms, and it goes all the way up to 16 ohms as well. Okay, at the risk of sounding obvious, I wanted to point out to maybe anybody that's new to vintage gear that this is a true amplifier. Okay, so the whole job of the MC 2505 is to just power speakers. Now, you could input one source if you'd like to and control the right gain and left gain buttons for your volume if you just had one source. But if you want to hook up multiple sources like a CD player, turntable, streamer, or DAC, something along those lines, you're going to need a preamp to plug into this unit to be able to control all those devices through this amplifier. Now, if you're new to vintage audio gear or just audio gear in general and you're not quite sure what a preamp is, I actually recorded a video simply called "What is a Preamp?" and I'll include a link to that description or include a link to that video in the description below. Okay, let's talk about the pros of owning a McIntosh MC 2505 next. One of the first pros of owning a McIntosh vintage unit is definitely the look. It's nearly impossible to find a better looking amp with the large meters and that classic blue McIntosh color than on the MC 2505. Now you'll notice that my unit does not come with a wooden cabinet, and my friend that sold me this unit said it was in storage, but I've never been able to get my hands on it. Which is kind of disappointing, but I still love the look of the unit without the wooden cabinet. I think it would look even better with it, but every time I go shopping for one online, they're over $300. So up until this point, I've passed on purchasing one. Okay, a second reason why I love owning vintage McIntosh gear is because it really holds or increases in value. For instance, I paid $800 for this unit over 5 years ago. And just for fun, I looked up eBay solds, not what's listed for sale, but what's sold. And a broken non-working unit, just like this, sold for $1,000. Now, one that also looks exactly like my unit without the wooden cabinet has sold as high as $2,750, which surprised me since it didn't have the wooden cabinet. But those that did have the cabinet sold kind of right around in the price range. And as we all know with eBay solds, the prices vary, but that's kind of your bottom line and then the top line. So when you're owning or buying vintage McIntosh gear, you can relax knowing that you're going to get a better value out of it later on down the road, or at least most likely probably what you paid for it. None of this matters because I don't want to sell my unit, but it's still comforting knowing that I did spend $800 and it's already been sold for up to $2,750. Okay, the third pro about owning an MC2505 is simply the sound. I love the sound of this amplifier, but let's dive deeper into that next. So since this was the first solid state amp manufactured by McIntosh, people often say it has a warm, tubey-like sound. Now, I own a Prima Luna tube preamp, but I don't own a standalone tube amplifier. So I don't think it's really fair for me to compare the 2505 with a traditional tube amplifier. I'll leave that for people with a little bit more tube experience than I have. But there are a few aspects of the sound of this amplifier that I really love. Okay, the first sound aspect that I really love about the 2505 is it's just so easy to listen to. And what do I mean by that? Have you ever had like your stereo gear all plugged up, ready to go? You listen to it for about 2 or 3 hours, and then all of a sudden you just kind of feel tired and you turn the music way down, or you just turn it off completely and want to do something else. Well, that would make it a fatiguing sound. And the 2505 is probably one of the most non-fatiguing amps that I've listened to. In fact, it was last Sunday, I pulled this unit out of storage and hooked it back up into my stereo system, and I had music playing for probably up to 8 hours and never got tired of listening to it. It's just got a great non-fatiguing sound that makes everything very easy to listen to. Okay, I think one of the reasons why this amplifier is so easy to listen to is because of the treble response, which I find to be very smooth. And I find this to be very helpful when listening to CDs. Oftentimes when you're listening to digital playback on a CD, that upper register can get a little sort of harsh and tiring, but the 2505 does a great job of smoothing out that treble response. And like I said, when I was listening to it for 8 hours a day, I was going back and forth between my record collection and my CD collection and found that both were very, very easy to listen to. Okay, let's talk about the bass. I find the bass to be very precise and present. Not too much, not too little. And that's not a bad thing for a unit that's over 50 years old. I mean, the bass response is not going to compare to a brand new modern unit just due to its vintage age. But it's also, in my opinion, the 2505 is not lacking bass. And when I'm listening to music, I'm not wanting to change to a modern piece of gear because I can't hear enough bass. So for me, that makes it just present enough to find the listening enjoyable. So that should give you an idea of how the 2505 sounds, at least to my ears. Now, let me tell you just a few annoyances that I have with the 2505. Okay, I'm not going to get too nitpicky on the cons of owning a McIntosh MC 2505 amplifier because these are all very minor things, but I think it's worth pointing out regardless. First thing, due to its age, the speaker connections are the very old school screw-in type of connectors. So, you know, you have to get your screwdriver out, unscrew the screw, take your bare wire, and then loop it around and then screw it up. And in typical vintage fashion, there's not a lot of room back there, and it can just kind of be a pain to connect those. Luckily, I have a remedy for this problem, and that is to buy these connectors. And they're gold plated, and you can purchase them on Amazon. They come in a set of 8 for like $13. In fact, I'll include a link to purchase these on Amazon in the video description below if you're interested. But as you can see, you would basically screw the amplifier's connection in right here, and either down or up. I prefer up. And then from there, this screw kind of, tightens and loosens. You can insert either your bare wire or your banana plug in there and then tighten it. So you're really, once this is screwed to the amplifier, you don't have to keep messing with the speaker wire. You can just change speakers out here and there, which makes things a lot easier. Okay, vintage McIntosh units have a very luxurious feel to them. And part of that is because the front part of the case is glass. And this is a great thing, but it can also be a real pain. And that's because the glass can break. In fact, I have a friend who pulled a vintage McIntosh 2505, just like I have, out of a garage that a lady had had in storage for years, and it had the beautiful wooden case and everything looked great, but there was a gigantic crack right down the front of the glass. Luckily, I think you can still buy the glass to replace them, but it just kind of makes it a little nerve-wracking whenever you're moving them around, that you definitely don't want to drop any piece of audio gear, but with this piece, and you could just shatter all that glass, that would just be heartbreaking. Now, the other issue here is on the other side of that glass, there's always sort of that black surface on McIntosh gear, and what I've noticed owning two pieces of McIntosh vintage gear up to this point is that black surface can kind of start to crack or even have like a little pitting behind it, and it ends up looking like there's cracks in the glass or maybe even a hole. And it's not that the glass is broken, it's just that surface behind it is aging, cracking, and coming apart. So if you'll notice here, you can see kind of near the pan lock button on the front of my unit where there's sort of an area that's kind of rotted away, and it looks like there's a hole there. Now again, I think that this can be replaced by just buying a whole new front glass piece unit for this unit. But if you don't want to spend the money to do that, you just sometimes kind of have to deal with that aged look behind the glass. Okay, speaking of breaking the glass, I replaced the lights on the front of this unit, and I was so nervous that I was going to break the glass because you actually have to remove the whole front glass plate in order to access those bulbs and replace them. Luckily, I didn't break the glass, but I've replaced lights on a lot of vintage amplifiers and receivers over the years, and this one was definitely the most tedious, so that I made sure that I didn't break the glass installing it back onto the unit. Okay, last thing, and I don't know why I actually said this was a con, because I actually like this, but this unit is really heavy. And I think the reason why I'm pointing this out as a con is I actually like heavy, expensive heavy gear. Like, you feel like you're really getting the bang for your buck when you've got something that's just really, really heavy like this amp. But the reason why I'm pointing this out is because if you're interested in purchasing one of these online, like eBay, Reverb, something along those lines, and you expect someone to ship it to you, it is heavy, and you're going to want to make sure that seller has this packaged very, very well. Not only due to its weight, but because of the glass that I spoke to earlier. The last thing you want is a poorly packed McIntosh unit showing up at your door, hanging out of the box because it's so heavy, with a bunch of broken glass. So just keep that in mind if you ever order one of these online. Personally, I think I would drive a few hours, even if needed, to go pick it up from someone's door rather than have it shipped, but that's just me. Something to keep in mind if you ever want to order one of these online. Again, it's worth repeating. These are very minor annoyances to live with in return for owning a great looking and great sounding amplifier. Okay, thanks for watching me gush over my McIntosh 2505 amp for a few minutes in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you don't own one, it might show a few things that you might like and dislike, and help you decide if it's something that you would want to buy for yourself later on down the road. But please, again, let me know, do you have an amplifier or a piece of audio gear that is in your collection that you'll never sell? I don't hoard gear, but I definitely have several pieces that I don't want to let go of. And whenever I see other people that have a collection and they don't want to let go of theirs either, it makes me feel better about myself. What can I say? Okay, here's another thing. I own another speaking of hoarding, I own another vintage audio receiver. It's a Marantz 2270 that I'll most likely never sell either. If you'd like to watch that video, it'll pop up right here. You can click on that and check out some of the pros and cons of owning a Marantz 2270 receiver as well. But for today, I appreciate you watching. Thank you.